Hello and welcome to the next episode of Python for Chemical Engineering Calculations. In this video, I'm going to talk about reading and saving files, specifically data files, files which we can then convert to NumPy arrays or vice versa, NumPy arrays which can be saved as files. So there are several ways to do it, and I'll show you the simplest one. So we'll start, as usually, from importing NumPy. Well, in order to read a file, I should have a file. So let me create a new file, clean here everything, and write the comment here, and then fill it with some data. 1, 2, 3. I use tabs as spacing. Alright, I'm saving that, and Python offers me to save it as a Python file, but it's not a Python script, so I'll just save it as data file.txt. The extension actually doesn't matter, but let it be .txt. Alright, so now I'm going back to my Python script, which I'm going to save as well. I'm saving it in the same directory. We'll call it reading.python. I do data. This will be my new NumPy array, but I'm not defining my NumPy array. I'm reading it from the function NumPy load txt, and then all I have to give here, well, the spider gives me all the hints with a bunch of different options, but the only necessary variable here is the file name, data file.txt. Alright, and after that I can also print my data. Let's see how it works. It read the file and put the content in the NumPy array and printed it for me. Very nice. So there are actually a bunch of options, as you saw, for the load.txt function. In particular, I can specify the type of the array elements with dtype equals integer, because it's all integer numbers, and rerun my script again, and as you can see, well, now it gives me an array of integers. Please note, when I was doing this in my file, I put these comment here. What's going to happen if I remove these comments and save the file? I'm rerunning my script, and it gives me an error because it expects an integer, and it got this string in the first line. However, what I can do skip rows equals, well, 1 or 2. I need to skip just the first row and run it, and it's going to still work because it's going to skip these blank line here and skip this one because I told it to do so. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it, if we don't want to read, let's say the data file is large and we don't want to read all the columns, we can read some of the columns, and then we need to specify the columns which we're gonna read. Let me comment this out and say column 2 and column 3 of the two NumPy arrays which I'm defining here. I will get them from NumPy load txt, then I use columns and give a tuple here for the number of columns 1 and 2, which will give me the second and the third column, and I need to unpack it in these two separate vector arrays. Unpack equals true. So if I do now, if I run this now and do print column 2 and then do print column 3, supposedly I will get my second and third column. Oh, it gave me this error because I did not add the skip rows here. So what I can also do, I can put back this comment sign here, save it, and rerun my script. Alright, what if my data file is not in the same directory as my Python script? Well, you can actually specify your path here in the load.txt. So let me clear this and let me create a new data file. So let's say I want to copy this content of this file here, and I'm going to save it not in my project 1 folder, but in my LearnChemE folder. So in the parent directory compared to that, and call it datafile1.txt. Let me do that. And if I want to read it here using the same function, sorry, I'm going to make this continue on a new line. So I need to add the path. And if I'm adding a path to the parent directory, I need to add the two dots here and change my data file. Let's see if it works. Well, it does, and in Learn it read the same file content. Okay, what if, let me create another file, and now let's make it a little different. I don't need this line with comment. Let's do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say this, and save it. Well, create a subfolder. In these subfolders, save this file. And by the way, it doesn't have to have the txt extension, so I can call it whatever I want. Let me call it datafile.dat. All right, so I created this, and now in order to read it, I need to use, well, the current directory dot, then the name of the subfolder, I called it subfolder, and then I called my file datafile.dat. And I don't want to skip any rows here, so I'm removing this one. And let me run it. Okay, well, that clearly looks like the content of my datafile.dat. Of course, after I read the content of my file, I can perform some manipulations with it, like with any other NumPy array. For example, I can create new data equals data, let's say numpy.sqrt of the data, and print the new data. And well, clearly I have the square roots of each of these elements. So how about I save these to a new file? And that is done very simply with a NumPy function called NumPy saved txt. Then I need to specify the file name. Let me call it new file.txt. Then I need to specify the name of the NumPy array, which is new data, and that's actually sufficient. So let me run that and try to open my file and see if it's there. I have this data file, new file txt, with the data I just calculated, which looks correct, except for it has all these extra significant figures which I don't need. So one thing you may consider doing is specifying the format of your output when you're saving file. All right, I'm going back to my reading and adding just a couple of parameters. So I'm adding the format, and the format in Python, you would need to add %, if then the number of spaces you want for this number, and the number of significant figures, and F would stand for the floating point format, and E for exponential. So I'll use F. And also, when I save files, I prefer to have some comments about what's in this file in case I open it, well, some months or years later and need to revisit it. So the header parameter would be my comment. So the comment in this case will be simple. This is a test file. All right, let me run that. Looked like it worked, and let me open the new file.txt and zoom it in a little bit, and it looks like it did what I wanted it to do. It wrote it in the format I wanted. Well, actually I didn't have to specify this comment sign, it edited by default.